had to bathe the injured alpha. His gaze betrayed not pain, but hunger. The air over Arendor was thick with smoke and the stench of war. The once vibrant kingdom, known for its silver-tipped forests and sparkling rivers, now lay under a shadow of ash and despair. Villagers whispered of the battle that had shaken the Silver Wolves' lands, a fight so brutal it seemed the very earth had groaned beneath the weight of swords and claws. Lyra moved carefully through the broken camp, her healer's satchel slung across her shoulder. She had been summoned for a task that terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. Her hands, steady from years of tending wounds and ailments, trembled slightly as she approached the central tent, the largest in the camp where the alpha of the Silver Wolves had been carried, the alpha. His name was Kale. Tales of his strength, cunning, and ruthlessness traveled faster than the wind. Yet as Lyra pushed aside the heavy canvas flap, what she saw made her pause. Kale lay sprawled across a makeshift bed of furs. His armor was battered, dented from the battle, and a deep gash ran across his shoulder, dark with blood that had begun to dry. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath a struggle. But what struck Lyra most was his eyes. They were a piercing silver, the color of storm clouds just before rain. And despite the blood, the wounds, and the evident fatigue, they did not speak of pain. They were sharp, alive, and hungry. Not for food or for victory, but something else, something intangible and unsettling. Lyra swallowed hard and reminded herself of the rules. As a healer, her duty was clear. Wounds had to be cleaned, pain soothed, and life preserved. But standing here, under the gaze of a man who could destroy her with ease, she felt her heartbeat quicken. She shook off the thought and knelt beside him, her hands brushing against the furs, preparing to examine the injury. "Move carefully," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "He's strong, even wounded." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile, a dangerous one that made the air in the tent feel heavier. "You are not afraid?" he asked, his voice low, a rough rumble that seemed to echo from his chest. Lyra met his gaze. "Fear is a luxury I cannot afford," she replied. She had learned early in life that fear could paralyze. Duty, however, could steady the trembling hand. She reached for the water basin she had brought, pouring warm water over her hands. Steam rose, curling like small ghosts around her fingers. Kale's eyes never left hers, and Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She dipped a cloth into the water and wrung it out, careful not to spill a drop on his wound before cleaning it.
"Relax your arm," she instructed, though he was already still, as though sensing the ritual importance of her task.
Lyra gently pressed the cloth to the gash. The sting of disinfectant made him flinch slightly, but his eyes softened, only briefly, before regaining their sharp, predatory edge. "You are skilled," Kale said, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "Few can touch me without fear."
Lyra paused, letting the cloth hover above his skin.
"Few should touch you at all," she said plainly. Her words were honest, even if they sounded bold, and fewer still would have the right. Kale's lips twitched upward in amusement, and he shifted slightly, allowing her greater access to the wound. It was a dangerous intimacy, a closeness neither of them had likely anticipated. And yet the air between them seemed charged, a tension that was heavier than the tense canvas walls. Lyra carefully dabbed at the blood, cleaning the gash as best she could. The warmth of the water and the gentle pressure of her hands drew a sharp intake of breath from Kale, subtle, yet noticeable. His eyes met hers once again, and this time, Lyra saw not just hunger, but curiosity. He was studying her as much as she was tending to him, and the thought made her heart beat faster. "You are brave," he said, after a long silence. "Or foolish." "Perhaps both." Lyra did not flinch. "Perhaps both," she admitted, returning to her work. The cloth traced the edge of the wound, cleaning away dried blood. She could feel Cale's muscles tensing beneath her hands, not from pain, but anticipation, or maybe something she dared not name. As she continued, she realized that bathing him was not just about cleaning the wound. It was a ritual of trust. He could overpower her with a single movement, yet he did not. He allowed her to touch him, to tend him, and in that permission, a fragile bond began to form. The water grew cooler, and she poured more from the basin, letting it trickle over the injured shoulder. Cale's eyes never left hers, and Lyra felt a strange, almost electric pull between them. She had treated many wounded men before, warriors, soldiers, and villagers alike, but none had stirred her curiosity and caution in equal measure. "You have questions," Cale said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Lyra froze, not because of fear, but because it was true. She did have questions, though she had not voiced them. She studied him for a moment before replying. "I always have questions," she said softly. "It is how I survive." Cale chuckled low in his throat, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "And yet you stay," he said. "You do not run. Duty does not allow for fear." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the soft sound of water dripping from the cloth filled the tent. Lyra could feel the weight of his gaze, the subtle power he exuded even in weakness. And then, unexpectedly, Cale reached out and grasped her wrist. His touch was firm, commanding, yet not cruel. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to narrow to the tent, to the water, to the sharp heat of his silver eyes. The hunger in his gaze, the one she had sensed from the start, was undeniable now. But it was more than physical. It was a hunger for understanding, for connection, for something she could not yet name. "You are unlike the others," Cale said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "You do not fear me, not completely. And yet you are aware of my power." Lyra's fingers tightened slightly around the cloth. "I am aware of your strength," she replied, "but my hands are not weak." Kael's lips curved into a smile, one that seemed both approving and dangerous. "Good," he murmured. "Perhaps that is why I allowed you to come so close." The words made Lyra's pulse quicken. She wanted to pull back, to maintain the careful boundary between healer and alpha, but she could not. Something in the way he looked at her, the raw intensity of his gaze, held her in place. "You must be careful," she said finally, her voice firmer now. "Curiosity can be dangerous, especially here." "I am aware," he replied, "yet I cannot stop myself." Lyra finished cleaning the wound, gently pressing a cloth to absorb the remaining blood. She noticed how tense his body was beneath her hands, how every muscle seemed to hold a story of battles fought and victories claimed. And in that tension, in that closeness, Lyra felt a strange kinship. "You should rest," she said, her voice softening. "The body heals faster when the mind is calm." Cale's gaze softened just a fraction, almost imperceptibly. "And if the mind refuses to calm?" "Then the body suffers," she replied, looking directly into his eyes. "And those who cannot rest are in danger." For a moment the tent was silent, except for the soft sound of her breathing. Then Cale spoke, his voice low and edged with something unspoken. "I have not been cared for like this in many years." Lyra paused. "And yet here I am," she said simply, "because it must be done." Kael studied her for a long moment, then leaned back slightly, as if testing her resolve, testing the fragile bond of trust forming between them. Lyra could feel the tension lingering, a pull neither could deny. Then, just as she was about to stand, he whispered, "Do not leave, not yet. I am not done with you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She knew the meaning behind his words was layered, dangerous, and consuming, and in that moment she realized something she had not expected. The task of tending a wounded alpha was not just about healing flesh, it was about navigating desire, power, and something that could either save them both or destroy them. As she stepped back, the flickering light of the lantern cast shadows across Kale's face, highlighting the sharp angles, the silver eyes, and the intensity that both frightened and fascinated her. She knew this was only the beginning. Outside the tent, the wind carried the distant cries of battle. But inside, an entirely different storm was brewing. A storm of hunger, trust, and the fragile beginnings of a bond that neither Lyra nor Kale could yet define. And as the night deepened, Lyra realized with a start that the Alpha's gaze had not betrayed pain. It had betrayed hunger, for connection, for trust, and perhaps for her. The healer and the Alpha were bound now, by duty, by fate, and by something darker and deeper, a hunger neither could deny. And the shadows of Arindor whispered that their story had only just begun. The night after tending Kale, Lyra could not sleep. The memory of his silver eyes, sharp yet haunted her thoughts like a persistent shadow. She tried to tell herself it was just duty, just the reaction of a healer to the intensity of a wounded alpha. But she knew it was more than that. His gaze had stirred something inside her, a mix of fear, curiosity, and an unexplainable pull that made her heart race. The healer's enclave was quiet under the moonlight. Tiny lanterns flickered along the stone pathways, casting soft, dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. Lyra walked among the herbs and poultices, her mind replaying every detail of the night before, the heat of his hand on hers, the tension in his muscles, the faintest tremor in his voice when she cleaned the wound. She sat on a stone bench, pulling her cloak tighter around her. A cool breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of the forest beyond the enclave. Lyra closed her eyes and let her hands rest in her lap, but even in the silence, she could feel the pull of Kale, the magnetic presence of a man both fierce and fragile. Her visions began again. Lyra had learned long ago that her gift was not only in healing the body, it was also in seeing threads of truth and glimpses of the future. Tonight, the visions were sharper, more vivid. She saw Kale standing alone in the ruins of a silver forest. Blood streaked across his armor, his eyes wide with something she could not name. Then another image, a dark figure, cloaked and faceless, whispering a curse into his ear. Lyra gasped softly, the images fading as quickly as they had come. The healer's instincts told her that the curse on the silver wolves was more than rumor. It had been whispered through generations, a blood magic that magnified desire and instinct, binding the alpha to those closest to him. If left unchecked, it could consume both the alpha and anyone who drew near. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the rustle of leaves. She turned sharply, her hand going to the small dagger at her belt, though she had no intention of using it. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and lithe. It was Kale. His armor was repaired, his movements measured, but the silver glow of his eyes in the moonlight made her heart skip a beat. "You are awake," he said, his voice a soft rumble that seemed to echo from the forest beyond the enclave walls. "I could say the same for you," Lyra replied, rising to her feet. She kept her voice steady, though inside her pulse raced. Kale stepped closer, the moonlight catching the sharp edges of his features. "You should not wander alone," he said, his tone half warning, half challenge. "The night is full of dangers."
I am aware,
she said, keeping her gaze steady. "And I am careful." "You are not afraid of me," he said finally. "Most would be trembling or running." "I am not most," Lyra replied simply. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. Then perhaps you are the one meant to help me." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Help you? I have done what was necessary. That is all." "Necessary is not enough," Kale said softly. "The curse is stronger than I imagined. and I cannot face it alone." Her heart tightened. The word curse was not new, but hearing him speak of it brought a weight she could feel in her chest. "If you truly need help," she said slowly, "then we must act carefully. The magic of the curse is dangerous. It can overwhelm the mind and body if not controlled."
Kyle nodded. "I know."
"And yet, I cannot turn away from you. There is something about you, healer, that the curse cannot touch. I feel it even now." Lyra's hands itched to brush back a strand of hair, but she kept them folded in front of her. "You speak as if you trust me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "And yet you have barely allowed me into your world." "I trust few," he admitted, "but something tells me that you are different." The wind shifted, rustling the trees and carrying the faint scent of rain. Lyra felt a strange shiver run through her body. She had never been so close to someone, so commanding, and yet so vulnerable. Cale's hunger, the thing she had seen in his gaze the night before, was not only for power or dominance, it was for connection, for understanding, for something he had denied himself for years. "Tell me about the curse," Lyra said finally. "If I am to help, I must know what I am facing." Cale's expression darkened. "It is the blood of the old wolves," he began, his voice low and steady. "A magic born of pride, rage, and desire. Every alpha carries it, but in some of us, it grows stronger, more consuming. It whispers to the heart, the mind, and the body. It will not rest until it is fed." Lyra swallowed hard. "And the cost?" Cale's gaze turned inward, and for the first time, Lyra saw something like fear. "The cost is everything. Friends, allies, even the love I might allow myself. It drives a man to extremes, to hunger he cannot control. And if someone is near me, it may consume them too." Lyra's chest tightened. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. Helping Cale would not only be dangerous, it could change her life forever. Yet some unspoken force drew her forward. "Then we must face it together," she said firmly. "I will not let it consume you or me." Cale stepped closer, the silver glow of his eyes reflecting in the lantern light. "You speak with courage," he said softly. "And yet I sense fear in you. Do not mistake it for weakness. It is part of being alive." Lyra felt a rush of warmth at his words, but she did not step back. "Fear keeps us alive," she replied. "It keeps us sharp." For a moment they stood in silence, the tension between them thick as the night. Cale's eyes lingered on her, searching, testing, and perhaps admiring. And then, unexpectedly, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent, yet it sent a shock through her entire body. "You are unlike anyone I have met," Cale whispered. "And yet I feel I have known you longer than a day." Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to look away, to retreat, but she could not. His words held a weight, a truth she could not ignore. "Perhaps," she said softly, "or perhaps it is the curse speaking through you." Kyle's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps," he agreed. "But if it is the curse, then it chooses wisely." The wind shifted again, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant howl of a wolf. Lyra felt the pull of the forest, the echo of ancient magic in the air. She knew that the curse was close, that it would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. "You will need to come with me," Cale said suddenly. "Into the forest. There are remnants of the old magic there. Places where the curse's power lingers. You must see them to understand." Lyra hesitated. The forest was dangerous, especially at night, and with magic she could barely comprehend. Yet the pull in her chest, the need to understand, to help, to face this darkness, pushed her forward. "Very well," she said finally. "Lead the way." Cale's eyes softened just a fraction, and he extended his hand. Lyra took it, and in that simple gesture a bond was formed, not of romance yet, not fully, but of trust and mutual purpose. As they walked into the shadowed forest, the lanterns fading behind them, the air grew colder and thicker with magic. Trees twisted in unnatural shapes, roots winding like serpents across the forest floor. Lyra could feel the weight of the curse pressing down, testing her courage, testing her resolve. Cale moved beside her, alert, protective, yet allowing her to step forward with confidence. They passed a clearing where the remnants of an ancient wolf altar lay shattered, stones etched with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Lyra bent to examine them, feeling the pulse of old magic beneath her fingers. "The curse is older than the silver wolves," she murmured. "It is not just a spell. It is part of their blood, their history, their very being. To face it, we must understand its origin." Kyle watched her silently, his eyes reflecting the glow of the runes. "Then let us uncover it together," he said quietly. "And may the forest not devour us before we succeed." Lyra nodded, her hands brushing against the glowing runes. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, the forest alive with unseen eyes. And through it all, Cale's presence was steady beside her, a reminder of both danger and protection, hunger and restraint. Suddenly, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. Lyra's heart jumped. Cale's muscles tensed, and his eyes glinted like silver knives in the dark. "Stay close," he whispered. "The curse tests those who enter here." Lyra's grip tightened on his arm. Together, they stepped into the clearing, the weight of destiny pressing down, the pull of desire and danger weaving an intricate dance around them. And in that moment, Lyra knew that their journey into darkness had only just begun, and that the hunger in Cale's eyes would not be sated until they faced the curse together, heart and soul. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise of trials, revelations, and a connection neither Lyra nor Cale could yet fully understand. The night was long and the forest deep, but within its shadows a bond was forming that would change the fate of Arindor forever. And as they moved deeper, Lyra felt a shiver of anticipation. The Alpha's hunger was not just his own. It had touched her as well. The shadows were only the beginning. The forest breathed around them like a living creature. Twisted trees arched high above, their branches forming a dark cathedral of shadows. Mist clung to the ground in ghostly tendrils, curling around their ankles as Lyra and Cale stepped cautiously along the uneven path. The glow from distant runes lingered in the air, faint traces of old magic that hummed against the skin. Lyra's heart pounded, equal parts fear and fascination. Each step seemed to pull her deeper into a realm outside time, where the rules of the world she knew no longer applied. Cale walked beside her, his movements precise and controlled, but the tension in his body was palpable. She could sense the pull of the curse within him, a restless force that coiled in his chest and gleamed in his silver eyes. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice low, barely above the whisper of the wind through the branches. Lyra nodded. "The magic here, it isn't just in you. It's in the forest, in the stones, in the air itself. I can feel its hunger." Cale's jaw tightened. "Then we must be cautious. One wrong step, and it could overwhelm us both." They reached a small clearing where an ancient stone altar rested, half buried in moss and vines. Faded runes carved into its surface pulsed faintly, as if alive. Lyra knelt beside it, brushing away the moss to reveal the intricate patterns beneath. Her fingers tingled as they traced the lines, each symbol resonating with the rhythm of her pulse. "This is a place of power," she murmured. "The curse, it was born here. The Alpha's blood magic was sealed into these stones generations ago." Whatever force lingers here, it will test us. Kyle crouched beside her, his gaze scanning the surrounding trees. Then let it test us, he said, his voice firm. I will not allow it to control me, not when you are here. His words carried more than determination. They carried trust, a fragile offering she knew was not easily given. She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. Then we face it together, she said softly. Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, just enough to make her heart skip. He reached out, brushing a hand lightly over hers as she traced the runes. The touch was brief, but the warmth lingered, as if the magic itself had recognized their bond. A low rumble echoed through the forest, shaking the leaves and sending small animals scattering into the undergrowth. The ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly, and Lyra felt the first real warning of the curse's presence. It's testing us, Cale said, his voice tight. It knows we are here. It wants to see if we are strong enough. Lyra rose to her feet, her cloak brushing the damp moss. Then we must respond. Magic this old, it respects courage and skill, but it punishes hesitation. Kyle nodded. I will follow your lead. They approached the altar together, their steps measured. The runes glowed brighter as they drew near, and Lyra felt a strange pressure in her chest. Images flashed before her eyes, visions of past alphas, their triumphs and failures, their hunger and their solitude. One in particular stood out, a young alpha kneeling beside a healer, their hands intertwined as a glowing bond formed between them. The healer's eyes were steady, full of calm and courage, and Lyra recognized herself in that vision. This is a choice, she whispered. The curse does not simply take, it asks. It tests our intent, our will, and our connection. We must be honest, or it will consume us. Cale's gaze softened, his silver eyes reflecting the faint glow of the ruins. Then I will be honest, he said quietly. I am drawn to you, Lyra, not just by duty, not just by magic, but by something I do not fully understand. Lyra's breath caught. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to remain steady. I feel it too, she admitted. The pull, it is stronger than I expected. But we cannot let it rule us. We must control it, together. Kyle's hand brushed hers again, this time lingering slightly longer. The heat of his touch was like fire against her skin, and she had to swallow hard to keep her composure. Then we will, he said, his voice firm. Together. The air around the altar shifted suddenly, a swirl of mist and shadows coalescing into shapes that seemed almost human. Figures emerged from the fog, tall and thin, their faces obscured by the shifting darkness. Lyra stepped back instinctively, but Cale's hand found hers, steadying her. The curse manifests, he whispered. It tests our fear and desire. Do not falter. Lyra focused, drawing on her healing magic, the energy she used to mend both body and spirit. Her hands glowed faintly as she extended her will toward the shadows, sensing the restless power in the air. The figures hesitated, wavering under her gaze. Cale stepped forward, his voice low and commanding. You do not control us, he shouted, and the silver glow in his eyes flared. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if acknowledging his authority. Lyra felt a surge of energy pass between them, a connection that went beyond magic, something deeper, something unspoken. Their bond, fragile yet growing, allowed them to push back against the curse together. But the test was not over. One of the shadowed figures moved closer, its shape more solid, more threatening. Lyra felt a pull in her chest, a sensation that mirrored the hunger in Cale's gaze. It was not just the curse. It was desire, curiosity and fear intertwined, challenging her to remain in control. Cale's hand tightened around hers. Focus on me, he murmured. Do not let it distract you. Lyra took a deep breath, centering herself. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of the forest, the rhythm of the runes beneath her fingers, and the warmth of Cale's hand. Then she opened her eyes, and with a single, deliberate movement, extended her energy toward the shadowed figure. Light erupted from her hands, a soft, steady glow that washed over the darkness. The shadow hissed and recoiled, shrinking back into the mist. Cale mirrored her actions, his silver eyes blazing, and together they pushed the remaining figures back into the fog. The forest fell silent again, the mist dissipating, leaving only the faint glow of the altar. Lyra's hands trembled from the exertion, and Cale lowered his own, breathing heavily. For the first time she allowed herself to look at him fully, not as a dangerous alpha, not as a patient, but as a man who had fought beside her, who had shared a moment of vulnerability and strength. "You were remarkable," Cale said quietly, his gaze softening. "I have faced many challenges, but never like this. Never with someone who matches me in courage, in will." Lyra felt a warmth bloom in her chest, and she knew that the tension between them had deepened, transformed into something neither of them could ignore. "And you," she said, "are unlike anyone I have ever faced, not just in battle, but in spirit." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, and for a moment the hunger in his eyes softened, replaced by something quieter, almost tender. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and Lyra felt the electricity of the gesture, the acknowledgement of their growing bond. But the forest was not done with them. A sudden, piercing howl echoed through the trees, closer and louder than before. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of danger, and Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Cale's muscles tensed, his eyes narrowing. "It is not over," he said, his voice low and controlled. "The curse tests more than strength. It tests loyalty, trust, and the choices we make under pressure." Lyra nodded, her hands brushing against his as they readied themselves for whatever came next. The bond between them was now undeniable, forged in shared danger and growing desire, tempered by courage and restraint. Yet the forest held more challenges, more revelations, and more hunger, both of the curse and of the hearts it touched. Together they stepped forward, deeper into the forest, toward the origin of the curse. Each step carried the weight of destiny, the pull of desire, and the unspoken acknowledgement that their lives and their hearts were intertwined in ways neither could fully comprehend. And as the shadows of the ancient forest whispered around them, Lyra realized the truth. The curse was not only a test of magic, but a test of connection, of trust, and of the hunger that burned between the healer and the alpha. They were no longer simply healer and patient. They were partners, allies, and perhaps something more. Bound by magic, by choice, and by the dangerous pull of desire that neither dared to name aloud. The forest held more secrets, and the curse was not yet broken. But Lyra and Cale had faced its first trial together and emerged stronger. Their bond deepened, their journey far from over. The forest had grown darker as Lyra and Cale ventured deeper. Mist curled around their ankles like living shadows, and the twisted trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches forming shapes that seemed almost human. Every step forward carried a weight, a sense of anticipation that pressed upon them, like the breath of the curse itself. Lyra's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. She could feel the pulse of the forest, the echo of ancient magic that had bound the silver wolves for generations, and she could feel Cale beside her, every muscle tense, every sense alert. He was both protector and companion, a force of nature she could neither resist nor ignore. "The source is close," Cale murmured, his silver eyes scanning the shadows. "I can feel it, the core of the curse. It waits for us." Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. Then we must be ready for anything. The forest tests more than strength. It tests heart, mind, and will. They approached a clearing larger than any they had seen before. At its center stood a stone pedestal, carved with intricate runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Around it the air shimmered with energy, a pulse that made Lyra's skin tingle. The curse's source was here, its power radiating like a storm trapped in stone. Kale stepped forward first, his hand brushing over the pedestal.
"This is where it begins," he said, "and this is where it will end."
If we are strong enough. Lyra knelt beside him, studying the runes carefully.
"The magic here is old and potent," she said. "It is alive."
If we are to break the curse, we must do it together. Our bond, our trust, it is the key. Kael's gaze softened, and for the first time, Lyra felt a vulnerability in him that was rare and beautiful. "Then we are ready," he said quietly. "Whatever comes, we face it side by side." The forest shuddered, and shadows began to shift around them. Figures formed in the mist, tall, faceless shapes that moved with a silent menace. The curse manifested, testing their courage, their focus, and the connection they had forged. Lyra could feel the pull of desire mingling with fear, the same hunger she had sensed in Kael's eyes before, now amplified by the magic that surrounded them. "Focus on me," Kael whispered, his hand finding hers. The touch was grounding, anchoring her to reality amidst the swirling chaos. "We are stronger together." Lyra nodded, drawing on her energy. Her hands glowed faintly as she extended her will toward the shadowed figures. The light wrapped around them, gentle yet firm, pushing back against the darkness. Kael mirrored her, his own energy blazing silver and strong, forming a shield that neither shadow nor curse could penetrate. The figures faltered, hissing and retreating, but one moved forward more aggressively than the others. It coalesced into a larger, more defined form, its presence radiating power and malice. Lyra felt her chest tighten as the air thickened, the pressure of the curse pressing against her mind. Kael stepped in front of her, placing himself between her and the shadow. "It will not touch you," he said firmly. "I will not allow it." Lyra's hand brushed his arm as she focused, drawing a calm strength from his presence. Together they extended their energy, light intertwining with silver, wrapping around the shadow in a cocoon that pulsed with warmth and determination. Slowly, the darkness began to fade, retreating back into the mist, dissolving into nothingness. For a moment the clearing was silent, except for their steady breaths. Lyra lowered her hands, feeling the warmth linger in her fingers. Kael exhaled slowly, his silver eyes softer now, a quiet relief in his gaze. "We did it," Lyra whispered, disbelief and triumph mingling in her voice. Kael shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It is not completely gone," he said. "The curse is weakened, but its remnants will linger. We must remain vigilant." Lyra nodded, though she could not keep the smile from her face. The first step had been taken, and together they had faced the darkness. The bond between them had strengthened, tempered by struggle and shared purpose. Kael turned to her, his expression unreadable for a moment before softening. "You have changed me," he said quietly, "not just by your skill, but by your courage."
"Your presence. I have felt the curse for years, but it was never so unbearable as when I was alone."
"With you, it feels different." Lyra's heart fluttered.
"And you have changed me," she replied. "I came to heal you, and instead, you have awakened something in me I did not know existed."
Courage, strength, even though... Kael reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, warm and steady. "Then we are more than healer and alpha," he murmured. "We are partners in everything that comes." A soft rustle in the trees reminded them that the forest was not yet entirely safe. Lyra took a deep breath, her senses alert. The curse's remnants were still present, subtle and cunning, waiting for a moment of weakness. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "We are ready," he said firmly. "Together we can face whatever remains." They moved forward, deeper into the clearing where the pulse of magic was strongest. The air shimmered, the runes on the pedestal glowing brighter with each step. Lyra extended her hands, feeling the energy thrumming beneath her fingers. Kale mirrored her, their energies intertwining, forming a bond that resonated with power and trust. The final test came swiftly. A surge of dark energy erupted from the pedestal, twisting the shadows around them into forms both beautiful and terrifying. Lyra felt the pull in her chest, a hunger that mirrored Kale's, amplified by the curse's remnants.
"Do not resist it alone," Kale whispered. "Let us face it together." Lyra nodded, closing her eyes and focusing on their bond.
Their hands met, fingers intertwining, and a wave of energy flowed between them. The hunger, the pull, the fear, it all became manageable, tempered by the trust they had built. Light surged from their joined hands, a brilliant silver glow that wrapped around the pedestal and the shadows. The dark energy screamed and writhed, trying to break free, but the bond between healer and alpha held firm. Slowly, the darkness began to crack, splintering like glass under pressure. And then, with a final, echoing sigh, the shadows dissipated. The pedestal's glow softened, leaving only a faint shimmer of the old magic. The curse was broken, or at least weakened to the point that it no longer held dominion over them. Kale lowered his hands, breathing heavily. His silver eyes were bright, alive and yet softer than Lyra had ever seen. "It is done," he said quietly. "The curse. It no longer controls me." Lyra exhaled, relief washing over her. Her hands still tingled from the energy, and her heart pounded with both exhaustion and exhilaration. "We did it," she said softly. "Together." Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "I owe you more than words," he said. "You have not only healed my wounds, you have healed me." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and something more profound. "And you have changed me," she replied. "You have shown me strength, courage, and the power of trust. I would not have faced this without you." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the forest around them quiet except for the faint rustle of leaves. The danger had passed, but the bond they had forged was permanent, unspoken, yet undeniable. Kale reached out once more, his hand brushing her cheek. "I thought I hungered only for survival," he murmured, "but I cannot survive without you." The weight of his words, the truth behind them, and the sincerity in his gaze left her momentarily speechless. Then, slowly, she placed her hand over his, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection they shared. "I will not leave you," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time, the hunger in his eyes was tempered by something gentler. Trust, hope, and perhaps the beginning of love. The forest seemed to breathe around them, the shadows retreating, the mist lifting, and the moonlight bathing them in a soft glow. The curse had been broken, the trials faced, and yet the journey of trust, desire, and partnership had only just begun. Together they left the clearing, side by side, stronger than before, bound not only by duty but by the unspoken hunger and connection that had carried them through darkness. The Alpha and the Healer walked into the night, their hearts beating in unison, ready to face whatever the future held. And as they disappeared into the moonlit forest, the whispers of Arendor carried a promise that even in shadow, even under ancient curses, the bond forged in trust and courage could endure, unbroken, and transform not only the hearts of those who dared to face it, but the fate of the kingdom itself. The story of the wounded Alpha and the healer had reached its first conclusion, but the pull between them, stronger than any curse, would shape all that came after.